Let's move on to the next stair.
So that people will not be able to figure out how they are plundered, how they are alcoholized, how they are killed in bandit showdowns, inter-ethnic conflicts. There must be some kind of smokescreen. For these purposes, there exists the third priority of generalized means of governance. What is it? These are world religions, various world ideologies that allow a person to be put into a mode of self-governance, so that, guided by these dogmas, he does what the owner needs. Using the sincere faith of people in God, the world religions were the instrument of fooling. When the religions exhausted themselves, the fooling of people began to be carried out on the basis of secular ideologies. One such modification was Marxism, which we have already discussed with you. Many people in our country are now guided by one or another understanding concerning God. In the book Dead Water, it is said that God as a supermundane reality exists. And this is demonstrated through the entire function of governance, through the description of the work of the intellect on a priori intellectless elements, through the description of the processes of the triunity of matter-information measure as a whole in the universe. This sounds unusual now. This can be called the highest reasoning or information field of the universe. In terminology of the conception of social safety, this is the highest hierarchical encompassing governance, and it is objective. In the conception of social safety, all of this is demonstrated and proved. The second level of understanding concerning God is the idea of God. They argue in the following way. It is unknown whether there is God or not, but it is needed that He would exist, so that He would explain to us how to live in harmony. The third level of understanding is various scriptures. The scriptures were written by people. Moses, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad did not write anything themselves. Mikhail Afanasyevich Bulgakov, in the novel The Master and Margarita, has a famous scene where Pontius Pilate, accusing Yeshua, says, "I repeat, but for the last time, stop pretending to be mad, scoundrel. What has been written down about you is little enough, but it is sufficient to hang you." And Yeshua replies, "No, no, hegemon. This man follows me everywhere with nothing but his goatskin parchment and writes incessantly. But I once caught a glimpse of that parchment, and I was horrified. I had not said a word of what was written there. I begged him, 'Please burn this parchment of yours.' But he tore it out of my hands and ran away." This phrase cost Bulgakov a lot, because he lifted the curtain over a terrible secret. Between what Jesus Christ himself said and what his disciples understood, there is a big difference. We are presented with the teaching of Jesus Christ in the form of the four Gospels. The word gospel means good news. We have four pieces of good news from Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And we say, where is the good news from Jesus Christ himself? Why are we given only the biography of Jesus Christ, which is set out in these Gospels? I ask our viewers not to get the wrong idea and think that we deny everything in the Gospels. No, there are good and right things there. So it turns out that there are many such Gospels. Why was it exactly these that were chosen? By the way, why didn't they set out the Apocrypha either? We found the Gospel of Jesus Christ, which is translated into English. There is one stored in the Vatican, and the other in the Austrian National Library founded by the Habsburgs. Read and compare what Jesus Christ himself wrote and what his disciples wrote. Evaluate for yourselves and find the truth. So, the scriptures differ from what Jesus Christ actually said. He said that one has to live according to God. We must be able to discern and recognize the voice of God and what He tells us through the language of life circumstances. We were also duped by the fact that they told us that paganism, polytheism, and idolatry are one and the same. Ancient Rus was pagan, but it was neither polytheistic nor idolatrous, because the Russians had the god Vishnu, from the Russian word for the highest, the idea of whom people had in different guises. That is, the hypostasis. What is it? For example, now I'm sitting here in plain clothes, talking like a scientist. But if I wear a military uniform, I will be a military man. But I remain the same anyway. The same concerned Vishnu, who was presented in the form of Perun, the god of fire, war, etc., in different guises. But God was one. Rus was neither polytheistic nor idolatrous, but it was pagan. What is meant by paganism? Many associate paganism with polytheism, idolatry. But this is not the case. And in this sense, Jesus Christ was also a pagan. Why? Because he saw the manifestation of God in the language of nature. Everything that surrounds us is the language of God. God is everywhere. That is why he said, "You look and talk to God through the living language that surrounds you, and do not become obsessed with the scriptures. The scriptures are dead." The fourth level of understanding is various religions. Religion in Latin means connection, a connection with God. Let's not go further into history. Let's recall the Northern Ireland conflict, the troubles between Protestants and Catholics. This conflict took place although the Protestants and Catholics have the same Virgin Mary and the same Jesus Christ. Let's look at another scripture, the Quran. Iran, Iraq. Shiites, Sunnis. The scripture is one, but the religions, the understanding of how to communicate with God are different. Or let's look at what is happening in Yugoslavia. There are Catholics, Muslims, and Orthodox Christians killing each other. And now let's look at Russia, which is a multinational country. If the people do not achieve the understanding which I'm talking about, sooner or later we will wash ourselves in blood. And all our politicians say, "Let the clergy figure it out." We say, "Excuse me, why do they have to figure it out?" The clergy, priests, muftis, archbishops, mullahs, etc., are the ones whose views on God are formed on the basis of scriptures, religious dominations, and things like that. In Russia nowadays, many of our fellow citizens rush to the priests with candles in their hands. Our people believe that they will help them. They will not help the way they did not help in 1917. What ideology was dominant in Russia until 1917? It was orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality. At that time, there was no radio, no television, no newspapers. And in every village there was a priest. And this army of priests should have prevented the tragedy of the people. But it failed to do so, because the people saw duplicity, i.e. in words one thing, but in life another thing. I have an old mother. She was born in 1907. She is from a family of old believers. Now she is 92 years old. I ask her, "How was it before the revolution?" She answers, "You know, my son, what did we see? As it goes in the saying, during the sermon, the priest does not mind staring at a lady." That is one thing in words, but another one in life. So it is a fact that it was the people destroying churches. Why? Because the people saw this duplicity. Tsar Nicholas II had everything in his hands: the police, the gendarmerie, the army. He could have just lifted a finger to put things in order in the country. But, as a result of such inaction, he renounced the governance over the country. So, what did we get in the country? As a result of the inaction of the Tsar, his abdication, and the inability of our clergy to reconcile, unite the people. A father went against his son, a brother went against his brother. These are all facts.
We are now touching on the sphere where people have the most sacrosanct, the most intense emotional experiences. Let's pay attention to one of the sides of the conception of social safety, which says, "Man, everything that you hear, reconsider it. Handle it yourself and do not entrust to any other the work on your own thinking."
So, we have already talked about Marxism. Many people say that life was better then, under pseudo-communism, under Marxism. At the time, all the mass media were in the hands of the CPSU Central Committee, i.e., in every workshop, in every military company, on every ship, there was a primary party organization, 18 million party members. And we say, why then, in August 1991, did they collapse like a house of cards within 3 days, and no one could oppose anything? This means that there was a flaw somewhere in the system, the party. We have already said that the flaw in Marxism is in the erroneous ideology, and religion also is enclosed into this conceptual power. As for church power, it is enclosed into this conception. In relation to the Bible, a dual ideological complex was developed, the Judeo-Christian, at the top of the crowd elite model, i.e., Judaism for the chosen by God, and below, Christianity. And this dual ideological complex is governed by the very top. Judeo-Christian ideology was the leading one, distinguished by high efficiency in comparison with others, because for the first time in the history of mankind, it became the center of concentration of governance. That is, according to the entire function of governance, they, for the first time, put forward, in the vector of objectives, the goal of domination over all countries and peoples. And there was a very long process of this domination. Suppose I am in Byzantium, you are in Russia, someone is in Japan, someone is somewhere else, etc. While we did not know each other, everyone lived as he saw fit. But as soon as we enter into an informational interaction with each other, a more powerful system begins to subordinate and inscribe weaker systems. And for the first time, the ancient Egyptian Jretzhood became such a powerful system, which put forward the goal to conquer other countries and peoples. They developed a system and an instrument with the help of which they began to carry out their expansion, and it all lasted for hundreds of years. After all, it is also important to comprehend that we, Russians, were taught to think in terms of 5-year plans. But as soon as you realize everything and understand that there are 50-year, 100-year, 1000-year plans, everything will immediately fall into place. In Egypt, there was a Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC, i.e., more than 3,000 years ago. Ramses II lost this battle. The pharaoh's troops were defeated by the Hittite troops. In honor of his defeat, Ramses II left a monument there, which says the following: "Everyone thinks that I lost, but within the next 3,000 years, everyone will see that I won." He lost on the 6th priority, but on the first one, the conceptual one, he won.
So we move on to the second stair.
The second stair is information. This is history. Analyzing the cause-effect relationships on a small piece of time and making a decision based on the analysis of these cause-effect relationships, probability of error will be one thing. if we expand the time interval of the analysis of the cause-effect relationships, then the probability of error in decision-making will decrease. That is, the longer the considered time interval, the more the probability of error decreases. From the point of view of governance over countries and peoples, and the history of our country, let's look at the following. Now, we are told that Sergei Kirienko is to blame for the default. If he had not spoken on August the 17th about the default, then now the reforms would be in full swing. We say, where did Kirienko come from? He appeared thanks to Chernomyrdin. And where did Chernomyrdin come from? And he appeared thanks to Gorbachev's perestroika. Where did Gorbachev's perestroika come from? It came from Brezhnev's stagnation. Where did Brezhnev's stagnation come from? We answer, from the darkness of Marxism. Where did the darkness of Marxism come from? From the fog of idealism, monarchism. Where did all of this come from? This came from Byzantium. Where did Byzantium come from? From Rome. Where is Rome from? And so on and so forth. In the book Dead Water, we looked into the global historical process as just a particular process in the evolutionary development of the biosphere of the Earth. For what? To minimize the error in our decision-making. Why is this done? Actually, we should be living on Earth naturally, running barefoot in the dew and drinking clean water, breathing clean air in the forest, basking in the sun. But we began to create a technosphere in the system, concrete buildings, railways, electric trains, etc. Can the ecosystem survive in this technosphere? That is, where is the limit? How will we develop further on? And the roots of all environmental disasters lie here. After all, one can say that driving on asphalt is good, and walking on asphalt is good. One does not stumble. So, let's asphalt the whole Earth. What will happen then? Then we will just disappear. Why? Because there will be no leaves, grass, all of this has to grow somewhere. And the question arises about proportionality. Where is the limit of creation and satisfaction of ever-growing material needs? Therefore, in principle, the global predictor solves this problem simply. They get rid of excess people. I suppose many people know about the theory of the golden billion. That is, now there are 6 billion of us on Earth. The global predictor believes that there should be 1 golden billion. These are the chosen ones. There should be a 2nd billion in order to serve them. Well, the 3rd billion is allowed. This is an auxiliary billion, a population of dunworms, which poke around at their daches, preparing plots of land for future planters. This is according to their conception. I mentioned Jack Attali before. One should read his book. This is pure Satanism. You know, we all make our own plans. But according to the agenda of the global predictor, we are excess people. Do you accept this? I think not. Therefore, here is the question. What should we do if our designs, intentions do not fit into theirs? This means that we must present our intentions. This is what we do. Factually, we all live in a global slave civilization. So one day, the slave owners of antiquity realized that the best slave is that slave who does not even understand that he's a slave, but enjoys his chains. Imagine a slave, a collar around his neck chained to a gallery, with an overwatcher keeping an eye on him. In that situation, the slave owners had to think about how to increase productivity. Besides, a slave always tried to escape, and therefore, an overwatcher had to be properly fed and paid. What way out did the slave owners find? They decided to give the slave what he wanted. What did the slave want? The slave wanted freedom. But if the slave has freedom, he ceases to be a slave. So what did they do? They created the illusion of freedom. Through religions, ideologies, they fooled people. All of this is a tool for fooling people. In this regard, Pushkin has the following words: "Grace, if you will, you peaceful nations, who never rouse at honor's horn. Should flocks heed freedom's invocations, their part is to be slain or shorn. Their dower the yoke their sires have won, through snug and sheepish generations. So they graze us like sheep, these spiritual shepherds of all confessions, and share us with the help of the usurious financial credit system." The conclusion is, this is their conception of governance. We all do not live the way we work, but the way we are governed. And the governance is carried out according to the entire function, according to a certain conception. In fact, there are only two conceptions: a satanic one that has triumphed all the time, and we have to pay tribute to it. After all, no matter how emotionally we are indignant, they have steadily governed for 3,000 years, and even more. Whether we like it or not, it is true. They graze sheep also on the historical priority. You know, some of us associate cause and effect relationships from 1917 with Marxism. And this herd walks around with red banners and says, "This is privaciousness." Other people, exactly the opposite, say, "Russia of 988 is holy, the christening of Russia," and so on. And they also walk around with different banners. Some other people state orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality. But there are others who say, this is not true, Russia is primordially pagan. And the one who implements all this, that one divides these people, divide and conquer. We are all divided. This is the importance of this priority. Depending on what period of historical time you present to people and show its attractiveness, people follow this idea. That is, ideologies are formed from the standpoint of history.